The sun was just beginning to rise over the small, dust-covered village of Macomb, nestled deep in the African savanna. Roosters crowed in the distance, goats wandered freely through the cracked pathways, and smoke curled lazily from thatched roofs as fires were lit for breakfast. Life here moved slowly, unchanged by the outside world. It was the kind of village where everyone knew everyone else, where secrets were hard to keep, and where reputation meant everything. In the middle of this quiet village stood a large compound, clearly belonging to one of the more well-off families in Macomb. The house had sturdy walls, wide wooden doors, and a metal gate, rare for this village. It belonged to Madame Dora, a stern woman in her late 50s, who was known not just for her wealth, but for her sharp tongue and colder heart. Her only son, Daniel, had married a local girl named Alika 2 years prior. Alika was just 22 then, young, quiet, and kind. She had soft eyes and a gentle voice, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. When Alika married into the household, the whole village whispered. Not because of the union, but because of the woman she would be living with. Madame Dora had a reputation that preceded her. Ever since her husband passed away years ago, she had ruled her household like a military camp. Servants were terrified of her. Neighbors avoided her unless necessary. People said she hadn't smiled in a decade. For Alika, marrying Daniel was a dream at first. He was handsome, charming, and from a family that could offer her a better life. But it wasn't long before reality crushed her hopes. From the very first morning she stepped into the compound as a daughter-in-law, she felt it, the invisible wall. The way Dora looked at her, as though she were an intruder. It wasn't just dislike. It was something deeper, more toxic. She had made up her mind about Alika without a word being spoken. "You think you're good enough for this house?" Dora said one afternoon, her voice like ice as she stood with her arms folded, staring Alika down while she swept the veranda. Alika didn't answer. She bowed her head slightly and continued her work, brushing the dust off the floor. "I see through you," Dora continued, stepping closer. "You're after our name, our land. You think because you're pretty and quiet, you can charm your way into taking everything from me." Alika's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. She had always been taught to respect her elders, to stay humble, to endure. Daniel, unfortunately, was not the man she thought he was. At first, he defended her, laughed off his mother's remarks. But slowly, as the months passed, he grew more distant. Every time Dora poisoned his ears with suspicions and bitterness, a little more of Daniel slipped away. Alika began to feel alone in a house full of people. She cooked, she cleaned, she served tea. She tried to please, to make herself invisible, but nothing she did could soften the heart of the woman who watched her like a hawk. It all came to a breaking point on a rainy afternoon. Thunder grumbled in the distance, and the wind blew through the banana trees behind the house. Alika had just finished preparing lunch. She set the table with boiled yams, roasted groundnuts, and a fish stew. She called Daniel, who was sitting in the living room with his mother. But before Daniel could stand, Dora spoke. "Leave it," she snapped. "Why should we eat food cooked by a snake?" Alika froze. "A snake?" Daniel asked, confused. "Yes, a snake," Dora hissed, standing up now. "She has been stealing from my jewelry box. The gold chain my late husband gave me is missing. Who else would take it?" Alika's eyes widened. "No, I would never. Liar!" Dora shrieked, pointing a bony finger at her. "Do not pretend with me. I've watched you, creeping around, whispering, plotting. I swear, I haven't touched anything." Alika cried. "Please, if you just search my room." "Oh, I will," Dora snarled. "And when I find it, you will regret ever stepping into this house." But nothing was found. The necklace never turned up. It didn't matter. By evening, Dora had made up her mind. She packed Alika's clothes in a thin nylon bag, threw it at her feet, and pointed to the gate. "Get out," she said, her voice eerily calm now. "Get out of my house, and don't you dare come back." "But I have nowhere to go," Alika whispered. Her voice cracked, and rain began to pour harder from the heavens as if nature itself cried for her. Daniel stood in the corner, silent. "Useless. You won't even say anything?" she asked him through her tears. "Daniel, please?" He looked at his mother, then at Alika, then back at his mother, and he looked away. That moment shattered something inside her. Barefoot, drenched in rain, Alika walked out of the gate. No money, no clothes except the ones on her back. No family to return to, her parents had passed years ago. No direction, just an open, muddy road stretching into the unknown. But sometimes, it is when we are stripped of everything that we discover who we truly are. She didn't get far. Maybe a mile down the road before the cold got too much. She collapsed near a mango tree by the side of the road, shivering, hungry, her tears mixed with the raindrops falling on her face. And then footsteps. An old man, bent slightly with age, walking with a wooden cane, came toward her. He wore a patched brown coat and smelled of firewood and herbs. He had a gentle smile and eyes that saw deeper than most. "Child," he said softly, "this is not a place for someone like you to sleep." Alika didn't respond. He bent down and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small leather pouch. He placed it gently in her hand. "It's not much, just enough to get you to the next town. Use it wisely." She opened her mouth to protest, but he had already begun to walk away. That night, she used the coins in the pouch to pay for a ride to the town of Kibera, a bustling marketplace 2 hours away. She slept behind a fruit stall owned by a kind widow who allowed her to stay for one night. The next morning, Alika offered to help clean the stall in exchange for breakfast. The widow agreed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Alika worked for food, for shelter. She never begged, never complained. She washed clothes, carried buckets, cleaned streets. She learned quickly. She watched how people traded. She listened to every conversation in the market, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. One day, she met a seamstress, Mama Khadija, who was struggling to finish a dress on time. Alika offered to help. With trembling hands, she picked up the needle and thread, and though she had never sewn before, something inside her clicked. Her stitches were neat, her eyes sharp. Mama Khadija was impressed, and so began a new chapter. Alika spent the next few years apprenticing under Mama Khadija. She learned to sew, to design, to measure and cut and create. By the time she turned 28, she had her own little table in the market, a small sewing station under a faded blue umbrella, where she took orders and crafted dresses from scraps of fabric. Her name began to spread. From market women to young brides, everyone wanted a dress by Alika. Her hands created magic. Simple cloth transformed into elegance. She saved every coin, refused to spend on anything but materials and tools. She worked from sunrise to moonlight, sleeping only 4 hours a night. And then one day everything changed. A woman from the city, a wealthy lady named Veronica, came to the market. Her car had broken down nearby, and while waiting for it to be fixed, she wandered through the stalls. She spotted one of Alika's gowns on display and stopped. "Who made this?" she asked. Alika stepped forward. Veronica studied her for a long moment, then said, "How would you like to come to Nairobi? I run a fashion house. I could use someone like you." That was the moment Alika's life took flight. But what she didn't know then, what she couldn't have imagined, was that 20 years later, the very road she walked in shame and silence would become the path of her greatest triumph. And on the other side of it, someone was waiting, broken by the weight of their past sins. Nairobi was nothing like Macomb. It was alive, louder, faster, unforgiving. Skyscrapers reached toward the heavens, taxis honked without end, and people moved like rivers in every direction. It was overwhelming at first. Alika had never seen so many lights, so many faces, so much noise. But beneath the chaos was opportunity, hidden like gold in the riverbed. Veronica was a woman of stature. Tall, elegant, always dressed in pristine silk. She had built one of the most respected fashion houses in the city, Maison Vera. Her designs had walked runways from Nairobi to Lagos to Johannesburg. And yet, something in Alika's humble strength and silent hands had drawn her in. The first weeks were difficult. Alika barely spoke English well. She dressed simply, her fingers were calloused from years of hand-stitching, and she had never touched a sewing machine before. But her raw talent was undeniable. Her sketches, though untrained, held soul. Her color combinations were bold, intuitive. She had a designer's heart born, not made. Veronica watched her quietly, testing her, challenging her. And Alika, she never backed down. She stayed late after hours, cleaning the workshop, practicing on leftover fabric. She asked questions. She made mistakes, but she never made the same one twice. By the end of the first year, Veronica placed Alika in charge of minor customizations, hemming, adjustments. By year 3, Alika was designing full gowns. Her pieces began to catch attention, first by clients, then by local fashion blogs. One blogger called her the seamstress with a story in every stitch. And what a story it was. But Alika never spoke of her past. Not once. Not even to Veronica. Not about Dora. Not about Daniel. Not about the rain or the night she was thrown out. She had locked that chapter deep within her, like a box buried beneath stone. To move forward, she had told herself she must forget. But the past has a way of clawing back. By the time she turned 39, Alika had opened her own boutique, Alika Designs, sponsored partly by Veronica, but built by her own hands. Her gowns were now being worn by celebrities, ministers' wives, and brides across the continent. She was invited to speak on television. Magazines wanted her interviews. But even then, she remained humble, always returning to her tiny workshop at the back of the boutique, where she continued to sew. One afternoon, as she was finishing a delicate beaded bodice for a high-profile wedding client, her assistant, Miriam, burst in. "Madam, there's a woman here asking for you by name." Alika looked up. "A client?" "No," Miriam said, hesitating. She says her name is Naomi. She says she's from Macomb." Alika's needle froze in her fingers. It had been 20 years since she heard anyone say that name. Slowly, she stood. Her hands were trembling slightly. She wiped them on a cloth, composed herself, and walked out to the front of the shop. And there she was, older, thinner, worn by the sun. Naomi had once been her only friend in Macomb, a neighbor girl who used to sneak her fruit when Dora wasn't watching. The moment their eyes met, Naomi's lip quivered. "Alika," she whispered. You're alive." "Yes," Alika said softly. "I am." Naomi collapsed into her arms, weeping. They sat in the boutique's lounge area, sipping tea, as Naomi's hands shook and her voice cracked. "We thought you died," she said. "After you left, there were rumors. Some said you drowned. Others said you had been taken by bandits on the road." Dora told everyone she had no idea where you went. Alika's face remained unreadable. She knew. She kicked me out herself. Naomi lowered her gaze. I know. I always suspected. But no one could speak against her. She controlled everything, even the church committee. And Daniel, he left the village not long after. He went to work in Mombasa. Some say he drank too much. He's not the same. Alika listened in silence. Then Naomi said something that made her blood go cold. Dora, she's sick. Very sick. She's lost everything. The house is falling apart. No one visits her. She sits all day in the courtyard talking to herself. She keeps calling your name. Alika looked away. She's asking for me? Naomi nodded. I think she's dying. And I think, deep down, she knows what she did. For a long time, Alika said nothing. Her eyes were dry, but inside her, 1,000 memories stirred. The rain, the pain, the silence of Daniel, the long nights on the streets. She had buried all of it beneath her success, beneath lace and glitter and fame. But now it came knocking. Will you come? Naomi asked. Just once. Alika stared at her tea, then whispered, yes. 3 weeks later, a black Mercedes-Benz rolled into Macomb. The same cracked road, the same leaning mango trees. But this time, the people didn't whisper with pity. They stared in awe. Children stopped playing. Market women dropped their baskets. Everyone turned to look at the car that gleamed like a jewel in the dusty village sun. And then the door opened. Alika stepped out. She was dressed in cream linen trousers, a silk blouse, and simple gold earrings. Her hair was tied neatly, and her face bore no makeup, only dignity. 20 years had softened her features but sharpened her presence. She didn't walk like a beggar anymore. She walked like a queen. Gasps rose from the crowd. Is that? Could it be? Yes, someone whispered. It's her. Alika. She walked slowly through the gates of the compound she once called prison, and found Dora sitting in a wooden chair, wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Her hair was gray now, her eyes hollow. Her hands trembled as she reached for something invisible in the air. She was muttering to herself. Alika, where are you? Bring me water, please. Alika stood before her. Dora blinked. Her lips stopped moving. Her eyes slowly focused on the figure before her. Alika? Yes, she said. It's me. Dora tried to sit up. You came. Alika didn't speak. I waited. I waited for so long. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Still, Alika said nothing. Tears rolled down Dora's cheeks. I lost everything. I accused you. I sent you away. I thought I was protecting my son. But he left me. Everyone left me. There was silence. Then Alika finally spoke. I didn't come for revenge. Dora looked up, confused. I came to show you what a daughter-in-law could have been, if only you had let her be loved. Dora began to cry, her shoulders shaking. Forgive me. Alika stepped forward and placed a warm cloth in her lap. Then she turned to leave. At the gate, a little girl from the village ran up and held her hand. Will you come back again, madam? She asked, eyes wide. Alika smiled gently. Maybe, she said, but not as someone's past. Next time I'll come as myself. She got back into the car. As it drove away, people whispered again. But this time, not out of gossip. This time it was respect. Because they had seen something rare. The return not of a victim, but of a woman who turned pain into power. The days after Alika's return rippled through Macomb like thunder rolling over hills. Women whispered her name at the well. Children played games pretending to be her, strutting down imaginary runways with banana leaves for dresses. Men shook their heads in disbelief. No one had expected the silent girl cast out in disgrace to rise like this. But inside the crumbling compound of the Mwendwa family, the weight of Alika's visit bore down like a curse. Dora had stopped speaking. She no longer muttered to the walls, no longer called out for her son or demanded tea from invisible maids. She just sat, silent, her eyes wide, unblinking, as if staring at the ghost of every wrong she had ever done. And the villagers began to wonder what had broken her so deeply. But there was one person who knew the answer: Pastor Elias. Now in his 60s, Pastor Elias had served Macomb for over 4 decades. He had officiated Dora's wedding, baptized Daniel as a boy, and watched Alika's quiet suffering from behind church pews. He had remained silent, perhaps too silent. But guilt is a heavy companion, and it had aged him prematurely. When he heard of Alika's visit, he came to see Dora. She was sitting in the same wooden chair, her fingers clutching the edge like it might fly away. "Dora," he said softly. She looked up. Her eyes flickered. "It's time," he said. "Time to confess. Not for the world. For your soul." She didn't speak. Until finally, a dry whisper emerged. "I thought I was doing the right thing." He pulled a stool and sat across from her. "Tell me. All of it." And so, for the first time in 20 years, Dora opened the floodgates of her past. Flashback, 25 years earlier. Dora Mwendwa hadn't always been bitter. In fact, as a young woman, she had been the village's pride, beautiful, articulate, fierce. Married into a wealthy family at just 22, she had quickly taken the reins of the household after her husband died, suddenly in a farming accident. With no sons at the time, she'd become the de facto ruler of the Mwendwa estate. Then came Daniel, her only son, her pride, her obsession. She poured everything into him: education, etiquette, discipline. Not because she was nurturing, but because he was her future investment. She had plans. Big ones. He would marry a politician's daughter, or a lawyer's niece, someone with power, someone who could elevate the Mwendwa name beyond just land and cattle. But Daniel had other plans. He returned from university one semester and said 5 words that shattered Dora's dreams. "I want to marry Alika. Poor girl. A weaver's daughter. An orphan with no connections, no dowry, no pedigree." Dora had been furious. "You're throwing away our legacy." But Daniel had stood firm. "She is kind, loyal, and she understands me." So Dora, swallowing her pride, pretended to accept. She smiled at the wedding, gave the village gifts, held Alika's hand in public. But inside her, a fire had started to burn. She watched Alika quietly, noticed how Daniel always smiled when she entered the room, how he trusted her opinions, how he stopped asking his mother for advice. And that was the deepest betrayal of all. Dora didn't just hate Alika because she was poor. She hated her because she was being replaced. So Dora plotted. First, small things. Accusing Alika of stealing food, insulting her cooking, making her redo chores until midnight, telling Daniel that Alika was lazy, disrespectful. Daniel tried to balance things, but he was caught in a web of guilt and loyalty. "She's my mother," he would say. "Give her time." But time didn't soften Dora. It sharpened her. Then one day, she overheard a conversation that changed everything. Daniel was telling a friend that he planned to take Alika away, to move to Mombasa and start fresh. Dora panicked. If he left, she would lose her son forever. So that night, she confronted him. "Are you leaving me for her?" "No," he said calmly. "I'm starting my life, with my wife, like a man should." That was when Dora snapped. That very week, She orchestrated it all. She waited until Daniel left for a church trip. Then she accused Alika of adultery with a farmhand, a quiet man who worked in the back fields. She fabricated stories, bribed 2 housemates to swear on it, and when Daniel returned, she screamed and cried until he believed her. He didn't even give Alika a chance to speak. "You embarrassed me," he said. "I trusted you." Alika had fallen to her knees, begging. But Daniel turned away, and Dora, stone-faced, threw her out into the night. The next morning, Dora burned all of Alika's things. She told the villagers that Alika had run off with another man, abandoning the family in shame. And then, she waited for her son to love her again. But he never did. Daniel stayed for a few months, then left. First to Nairobi, then to Mombasa. His letters stopped. His phone calls ended. He never returned. Dora had won the battle, but she had lost the war. And slowly, everything began to crumble. Tenants refused to pay rent. The land was sold piece by piece. She fell out with church elders. Her name, once respected, became a whisper of warning. Now, 2 decades later, she sat in rags, alone, and her greatest shame had walked back into her life in silk. Back in the present, Pastor Elias sat in silence after Dora finished. He finally spoke. "You lied. You destroyed her life. And your son's." Dora wept. "I thought if she disappeared, everything would go back to how it was. But it never did." She shook her head. Then Elias leaned forward. "You must tell Alika, not just whisper to me in shadows. The truth must be spoken, while you still have breath." Dora nodded weakly, but fate had other plans. That night, her health took a turn. She collapsed in her sleep, and by morning, she could barely speak. News spread. The villagers whispered, "The curse has come." But for Alika, it wasn't a curse. It was closure. When she heard of Dora's condition, she returned quietly. This time, not in a luxury car. She walked. She entered the same room, sat by the same bed. Dora's eyes fluttered open. "I'm sorry." "I know," Alika whispered. "I lied. You were innocent. I destroyed everything." Alika reached for her hand. "I forgive you." Dora gasped once, then smiled, and closed her eyes forever. But just as Alika thought the story had ended, a new storm began to rise. 1 week after the burial, Alika received a letter from a law firm in Mombasa. The sender? Daniel. He was alive, and he wanted to meet. But the last line of the letter made her knees buckle. "There's something I must confess. Something that changes everything we thought we knew." Alika stared at the letter again, as if the words would change. "There's something I must confess. Something that changes everything we thought we knew." Her hands trembled. For 20 years, she had accepted her fate. A poor girl betrayed, cast out, left to rebuild from ashes. She had made peace with it, or so she thought. But this letter ripped that piece apart. Why now? Where had Daniel been all these years? And what truth could possibly change everything? She packed a single bag and boarded a bus to Mombasa. The journey was long. Hours passed under the scorching sun, through valleys and market towns, along the coast where the air turned salty and humid. But her mind was far from the scenery. It danced with shadows from the past. Daniel's voice, Dora's betrayal, the silent nights in the cold, her unborn child, yes, the child, the one Daniel never knew about. 20 years earlier, the night after she was cast out, Alika had stumbled out of the compound barefoot, her belongings thrown into the mud. Her body ached, her heart shattered. But it wasn't just grief weighing her down. She was carrying a secret. 2 months pregnant. She had planned to tell Daniel that week. But everything happened too fast, too cruel. And before she could speak, she was already branded a traitor and thrown into darkness. She never told anyone. She feared being judged, or worse, having the child labeled fatherless. She went to a distant village, worked as a housemaid, then as a cook. When her daughter was born, she named her Maya, meaning illusion in Sanskrit, because that was how life had felt, like a beautiful dream stolen by a nightmare. But she never let Maya grow up with bitterness. She raised her with strength, with dignity, with truth, except for one thing, the identity of her father. Until now, back to the present, Mombasa. The law office was cool, lined with mahogany and glass. A young receptionist guided her inside. Daniel was waiting, older, worn, but unmistakably him. He stood the moment she entered. For a long time he couldn't speak. His eyes moved from her face to her hands to her eyes again, as if he needed to see her from every angle to believe she was real. "Alika," he said at last, "you haven't aged a day." She gave a small, guarded smile. "You have." They sat. Silence. Then Daniel sighed, deeply, painfully. "I'm sorry," he began. "What I did, what I believed, it was unforgivable." She nodded. "It was." He looked down. "But I was manipulated, lied to, and not just by my mother." That caught her attention. "What do you mean?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a diary. Leather-bound. Old. "My mother kept a diary," he said. "I found it after she passed. Shattered me." He opened to a page. "Read aloud." "Daniel will never know the truth. He must never know that his father planned this. That it wasn't just jealousy, but fear. Fear that the girl might uncover the past." Alika blinked. "Your father died when you were young." "Yes," Daniel said. "Or so I was told." He turned to her, eyes burning with intensity. "But that's the lie. He never died. He faked his death and fled to South Africa. My mother helped cover it up. And it's because of you." Alika's breath caught. "Me?" Daniel nodded. "She wrote that when you first came to the house, he recognized something in you. A resemblance, a familiarity. He did some digging and believed that you were his daughter." "What?" "Yes," Daniel whispered. "He thought he had fathered a child with a woman from the slums before he married my mother. He never confirmed it. But he panicked. If it were true, and if I married you, it would mean—" Alika's voice broke in. "We would be half-siblings." Daniel nodded, horrified. "Rather than investigate," he ran, "my mother stayed and vowed to separate us at any cost. She staged the adultery accusation to protect the family name, and to protect me from unknowingly marrying my own sister." Alika sat frozen. "But I'm not his daughter." Daniel nodded again. "You're not. I ran a DNA test using a strand of hair I found in one of your old things. My mother had kept some of your clothes. You're not related to him. It was all a lie, a suspicion that ruined our lives." Tears streamed down Alika's face. "So I was thrown out for nothing. For a rumor," Daniel whispered. "A rumor no one had the courage to verify." Alika stood pacing. Her hands shook. "I suffered. Alone. I raised our daughter with nothing. And you believed all of it?" Daniel looked down in shame. "I was young, angry. I thought I was betrayed. I left to forget you, but I never could." There was a long silence. Then he looked up. "You have a daughter?" Alika hesitated. "Yes. Her name is Maya. She's 20, studying medicine. Brilliant, brave, more than we ever were." Daniel swallowed. "Does she know about me?" "She knows of you, but not the full truth. I didn't want her to grow up hating a man she never met. He leaned back, eyes glistening. Can I meet her? Alika looked at him, and for the first time in 2 decades, she saw not the boy who broke her heart, but a man crushed by time, by guilt, by truth. Maybe, she said, but not yet. She needs time, and so do I. Daniel nodded. Then from his pocket he pulled out an envelope. What's this? She asked. It's the deed to the Mwendwa estate. I want you to have it. The house, the land. It was always yours. You were the only one who treated it like a home. Alika shook her head. I don't want it. Then give it to Maya. Let her build something new from the ruins. She took the envelope. Then, softly, why now, Daniel? Why reach out after 20 years? He looked at her, face grave. Because I'm dying. The words hit like thunder. I have a rare blood disorder, he continued. Diagnosed too late. Months, maybe a year. I needed to make peace before I go. Alika felt something heavy rise in her throat. I'm not here for pity, he said. I'm here for truth. For the truth I owe you. And our daughter. She sat beside him. And for a moment neither spoke. 1 month later, back in Macomb, Alika stood by her daughter, Maya, in front of the Mwendwa estate. It was being renovated, painted, given new life. Maya, tall and radiant, looked at the land curiously. So, this was where you lived? Alika nodded. Once. It was a place of pain. But maybe, for you, it can be a place of hope. Maya smiled. And my father? Will I meet him? Alika hesitated. Then soon. But first, let's fix this place. Let's give it the future we never had. Behind them, builders worked. Children played nearby. Life for once moved forward. And as Alika watched her daughter laugh, her blood, her legacy, she realized something. The past could not be erased. But the future could still be rewritten. The air in the hospital room was thick with silence. Beeping monitors, soft footsteps, faint rustling of bedsheets. Daniel lay on the bed, his frame thin, his skin pale. Time had drained him, but there was still fire in his eyes. Eyes that searched the doorway the moment it opened. Maya stepped in, tall, graceful, her mother's posture. But his eyes. She looked at him, hesitated, then walked slowly to his side. Alika stood at the back, heart pounding. Daniel blinked. His voice was a whisper. You look just like I imagined. Maya's lips trembled. And you don't. A weak chuckle escaped him. Fair. She pulled up a chair, sat, folded her hands in her lap. So, you're my father. Daniel nodded. I don't know whether to hug you or hate you, she said honestly. That's fair too. Another silence. Then Maya's voice softened. I don't know your story, only what Mom told me. But I know one thing, she never let me grow up bitter. And I won't start now. Daniel's eyes moistened. You have her strength. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a stethoscope. I'm going to be a doctor, she said. I want to help people who've been broken, misjudged, cast aside like her. Like me. Daniel smiled. Then I've already done one good thing. She leaned in, gently placed the stethoscope on his chest, listened to his heartbeat. I wanted to hear you, she whispered. At least once. Daniel turned to Alika, standing still in the corner. Thank you for raising her. For not poisoning her against me. Alika stepped closer. I didn't do it for you. I did it for her. She deserved a future, not a grudge. Daniel nodded. And she built one. But there's something I need to give her. One last thing. He struggled to reach the drawer beside his bed. Alika helped him. Inside was a folder. Thick, Stamped. Official. What's this? Maya asked. Daniel looked at her. Your inheritance. Maya blinked. What? He smiled faintly. Over the past 10 years, I've been funding a chain of small clinics. Places where the poor could be treated for free. I kept them anonymous, hidden behind charities and trusts. He pointed to the folder. They're yours now. All of them. Maya's mouth parted. Why? Because I ruined your beginning. I won't ruin your purpose. Alika stood still, tears rising. She remembered the nights she held Maya close, counting coins just to buy porridge. The days she walked miles in the sun to cook in strangers' homes. The times she cried alone, praying her daughter would never know that kind of pain. Now here they were, a man on the edge of death, handing his redemption into the hands of the next generation. Weeks later, the final farewell. Daniel was buried under a baobab tree on a hill just outside the Mwendwa estate. The sun was setting. Golden light touched the leaves. A gentle wind moved the grass like waves. Alika stood beside Maya, both dressed in white. Around them, villagers, old workers, even children Daniel had helped silently through his clinics. A priest whispered prayers. Then silence. Maya stepped forward. She didn't cry, not because she didn't feel it, but because something deeper held her up, something called legacy. She placed a white rose on the grave, then turned to the small crowd. My father made mistakes, but in the end he tried to make things right. And for that I forgive him. Her voice trembled. And I promise to honor what he started, not for his name, but for those who need healing, who need hope. Applause broke out quietly. Even in grief, her words lit something in the hearts of those gathered. Alika reached out and held her daughter's hand. Months later, the clinic reopens. A sign was raised above the entrance. Maya Foundation Clinic for the forgotten, the forsaken, and the brave. Inside, children laughed in the waiting room. Nurses moved with purpose. Clean walls, fresh equipment. A place that once had no space for Alika now belonged to her daughter. Alika walked through the halls, smiling at the patients. She wasn't a doctor, but she was something else, a survivor, a mother, a witness of the long road from pain to purpose. In her office, Maya was writing a letter to the child I will have someday. It began, "This world can be cruel. People will turn their backs on you. But if you carry light in your heart, it will find a way through. Just like your grandmother did, just like I try to do, and just like I hope you will." Epilogue. One last visitor. One evening, as the sky turned orange, a luxury car pulled into the courtyard of the clinic. An old woman stepped out, slow, bent, her eyes clouded with age, but filled with recognition. Alika saw her through the glass door and froze. It was Dora. Her hair was gray, her face tired, her pride gone. They stood in silence. Then Dora said hoarsely, I heard about Daniel, and the girl came to say, I'm sorry." Alika's lips tightened. "It's 20 years too late." "I know," Dora whispered, "but I have nothing now. I thought if I came here, maybe I could find peace before I die." Alika stared at her, the woman who destroyed her life, who cast her out into the dark. But then, Maya stepped out beside her mother. Dora's eyes widened. So much like Daniel, so much like Alika. I'm your grandmother," Dora said softly. Maya tilted her head. "Biologically, yes, but I have only one grandmother. She's the one who held me when I was sick, who never lied to me, who taught me strength." Dora flinched. "I deserve that." Alika stepped forward. "You deserve the truth, but I won't give you revenge. I'm not like you." She turned away. But Maya, after a pause, said gently, "There's a bench under the mango tree. You can sit there if you need to rest. But if you want forgiveness, that will take time." Dora nodded. "I'll wait,"